Good day, everyone, and welcome to the Employment and Economic Stability Services for Fathers webinar. Today's conference is being recorded. At this time, I would like to turn the conference over to Mr. Nigel Vann. Please go ahead, sir.
Well, thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome again to today's National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse webinar on Employment and Economic Stability Services for Fathers. If you've joined us before, you're somewhat familiar with how this works. You know, we provide these webinars and a variety of other resources as part of a learning community that you can contribute to and learn from. And so, as always, we welcome and encourage your input and participation. And we'll be explaining a little bit about how you can ask questions today and in the future. So, first of all, I wanted to go over a few notes and reminders. The audio for today's webinar, as you just heard, is being recorded. You can hear the audio through your computer, and the recording, a transcript, and all presentation materials will be posted on the fatherhood.gov website in the next few weeks. So we do encourage you to check back and review those. At the end of today's webinar, we'll have a Q&A session, as we usually do. To ask a question for the presenters to respond to at the end, you can use the Ask a Question box that you see at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And we'll answer as many of those questions as we can at the end of the webinar. If there's any questions that we don't get to, which does often happen, we will post written responses to those when we post the other materials. You also see there's a chat box on the left-hand side, and we encourage you to use that just to talk among yourselves if you wanted to introduce yourself. But if you do have a question for the presenters, please use the Ask a Question box at the bottom. And you'll also see on your screen a web links box in the bottom left corner. That's got just links to the fatherhood.gov website and then the organizations for each of our presenters if you want to learn more about what they do. You can also download from the downloadable resources box the bios for today's presenters and also a resources list with other resources pertaining to the topic. So with that, I'm going to invite Damon Waters, who's a program specialist at the Federal Office of Family Assistance, who is the organization responsible for everything we're doing here. They give us the green light to do things, and Damon works closely with Lisa Washington Thomas, whose voice you usually hear at the beginning of these webinars. So Damon, if you'd like to say a few words to get us going here, please.
Thanks, Nigel. And like Nigel said, on behalf of Lisa Washington Thomas and Office of Family Assistance, thank you all for joining us for today's webinar about employment and economic stability services for fathers. We're going to hear about strategies and resources that can help low-income fathers gain new employment skills, find better jobs, and improve their overall financial situation. Many, perhaps most, of the fathers who participate in fatherhood programs are looking for assistance in the areas of employment and economic stability. As Nigel pointed out in a recent NRFC blog, getting a job that pays a living wage in our 21st century economy is not easy, particularly if someone doesn't have education or training that matches available jobs, has recently returned to the community from a time in jail, or the available jobs are hard to access with available public transportation. However, with the right approach and services, it is possible to help low-income fathers get a leg up on the employment ladder. Our presenters today are going to talk about lessons learned from research and practice that can help you in your work with fathers. One way that fatherhood programs can increase the chance of success is to develop partnerships with community agencies and individuals. Again, as Nigel pointed out in his blog, responsible fatherhood programs can be a bridge between fathers and the community by serving as a key access point for clients and for employers, child support, and others. You can work with agencies that provide job skills training to ensure that your program participants are qualified for available jobs. You can show employers how your program can help them hire and retain reliable, qualified employees. And you can work with your local child support office to make sure that child support orders are set and modified based on current income and employment. I hope you find the webinar informative and helpful. We've been asking you a couple of poll questions during the webinar to get an idea what you do in your programs. Please take a moment to respond to those questions as if can help our presenters frame their comments to fit your experience. And please continue to send ideas and questions to the Clearinghouse team at info@fatherhood.gov. Again, that's info@fatherhood.gov. We'd love to hear from you. And now, I would like to turn things back over to Nigel.
Thank you very much, Damon. And as you'll see on your screen, we've just got a slide up there just with some information about the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, the Clearinghouse is funded by the Office of Family Assistance to provide resources that support fathers and families. And you can see a couple of web links there. You can, besides just fatherhood.gov, a couple of things you can access there is our Responsible Fatherhood Toolkit, which has got various advice for, I'm sorry, my screen just went blank. I have to reboot it. Which has got various advice for programs. And then also we have the helpline. I really do want to stress that. That's a number that you can dial to get more information about ways in which fathers and the mothers of their children can deal with the various issues that come up. It's a particularly good line for people who need mediation. We have trained mediators on the end of that line, and they also have information that they can use to refer you to programs and resources in your own local area. And you also see on there our Facebook and Twitter handles and contact information for Lisa Washington Thomas, again, our lead at OFA, and Kenny Braswell and Patrick Patterson, our project director and project manager, respectively. So today we're going to be talking, as Damon said, about ways in which fatherhood programs can help the men they work with in terms of employment, which is one of the major presenting issues, as most of you probably know, of fathers coming to programs. There's a lot of other guys also looking for help to sort out their child support issues or maybe co-parenting issues. And again, quite often the answer to those kind of issues comes down to getting a better job. And, it's not just getting a job, it's finding and keeping a job that pays a living wage. And, that's not easy all the time. So today we're going to hear from our presenters about lessons from research and practice, as Damon said, that's going to help you. So these are our goals today. We're going to share lessons learned and just have a conversation about ways in which fatherhood programs can provide as much support as possible for their fathers. We're being joined by three very experienced presenters today. Dan Bloom has provided research with MDRC for well over 20 years. He directs MDRC's work on groups seeking to gain a foothold in the labor market, including former prisoners, disconnected young adults, low-income non-custodial parents, welfare recipients, individuals with disabilities, and many others. He's currently directing 2 large-scale federal projects that are testing subsidized and transitional employment programs. And since he joined MDRC in 1988, he's co-authored more than 40 research reports and contributed articles to various published volumes on workforce and youth policy. So Dan will be telling us about, he'll be providing an overview of past and current research that really throws light on how best to help low-income men in today's labor market. We're also going to hear from 2 experienced practitioners who are going to share some of their knowledge and lessons learned about ways that they've been able to help fathers improve their prospects for steady employment and economic stability. So first of all, after Dan, we'll hear from Halbert Sullivan, founding president and CEO of the Father Support Center in St. Louis, Missouri. Halbert provides executive leadership, administrative oversight, fundraising, marketing, and PR support for the Father Support Center. The support center promotes fathers' involvement in their children's lives through intensive job training, group therapy, community service, and parenting workshops. Since its inception in the 1990s, the support center has served almost 12,000 fathers and their families, transitioning non-participating fathers to a position of involvement and equity in the lives of over 29,000 children. And so Albert's going to be sharing some of the secrets to what he's done over a very long period of time. You know, I look at Albert as one of the real pioneers of this fatherhood work, along with folk like Joe Jones at the Center for Urban Families and Wallace McLaughlin at the Center for Fathers in Indianapolis, Indiana. They've all been doing this work for well over 20 years and have large budgets and staff to keep that going. They're a role model for a lot of us. And another role model we have is Carl Chadband, Chief Operating Officer with the Kanawha Institute for Social Research and Action, or as we fondly refer to it, KISRA, based in Dunbar, West Virginia. Carl has a background in education and community economic development with extensive experience developing partnerships between nonprofits and federal and state agencies, which is really a key skill for getting this kind of work done. Carl has managed employment programs for ex-offenders and non-custodial fathers, and he's also got experience in media, marketing, and technology management. He's taught in the public school systems of Delaware and New Jersey as well. He's a certified GED instructor and a certified program return on investment trainer through St. Wall Street. You can learn more about them from their downloadable bios and also their websites. So now I'd just like to move us to our first poll question before I bring Dan in. So Enzo, can we get the first poll question? As you'll see here, what we're asking is, and again, this is just to help the presenters frame some of their remarks to have a view of the kind of things that you're doing in your programs. So which of the following best describes your employment services for fathers? Just please check one of these boxes. Which of the following best describes your employment services for fathers? You can say, we provide job readiness services only. We provide job readiness services and work closely with employers to find jobs for our participants. We work with a community partner who provides most of our employment services. Our current focus is more on helping our fathers with parenting and relationship skills, or you can check the other box. I'll just give you a couple more seconds to respond to that. It looks like we've got a fairly even mix between second, third, and fourth options there. Okay, well, thank you very much. That's very helpful. And so with that, I'd like to turn the time over to Dan Bloom to tell us some of his insights from all the research he's been involved in and other research that he's familiar with. Dan, the time is yours.
Thanks, Nigel. Thanks very much for inviting me to participate. So I was asked to talk about what's been learned from research on employment and fatherhood programs. I thought I'd spend just a minute talking about where the evidence comes from. Listing on this slide are a few things that I think are most important. So practitioner wisdom, that's what I've learned and others have learned from talking to folks like you who are on this call, probably the most useful source of information in some ways. Descriptive studies are studies that, you know, basically as they sound, they describe what studies do, but they don't necessarily try to figure out the outcomes or impacts of the programs on participants. And then what I'm going to mostly talk about today are evaluations, formal evaluations that use what's called a random assignment design that many of you are probably familiar with, where individuals are assigned at random using sort of a lottery-like process to either a group that has access to a program or to a group that just has access to whatever else exists in the community but does not have access to the program being tested, sometimes call that a control group. There have been, I'm going to sort of extrapolate evidence from lots of different kinds of studies. Some of them particularly were of studied programs that targeted fathers. often in the child support system. Other programs that served fathers but didn't necessarily target them, so they were one of several populations. And then all the way down to programs that primarily served women, often in the welfare to work context, and there are obviously some differences there, but I think some of those results can be helpful as well. So just to start with a few key points to remember, and these are probably obvious to many of you on the phone, we focus so much on the participants in our programs, barriers that they face, and so on. But I just thought it was important to say, even though we all sort of know it intuitively, that the context matters so much in terms of determining what it is that we can do and the success that programs can have. So I'm thinking about factors like the decline in manufacturing jobs that used to offer relatively high wages for people without post-secondary education. There are many, many fewer of those now. Criminal justice policies and child support policies, which vary a lot from state to state, but can obviously have a great deal of effect on participants' outcomes and their ability to succeed in programs. Employment discrimination, which many studies have documented, people's ability to get jobs are affected by discrimination among employers in the labor market. So all of these things are hovering around in the background and affecting everything that you all do every day. And I just wanted to make sure we sort of say that first. A couple of other things just to note. Low-income fathers are a diverse group in terms of employability, and you know that from your programs. These are not folks that need the same thing. They have different levels of ability to get jobs with or without assistance, and so that diversity is an important factor in designing programs. The second thing is that when we do studies where we actually, some individuals are randomly assigned to a control group, one of the things we find is that many people actually get jobs even without the services of the program that we're testing. But for a lot of people, the problem is not so much getting a job, it's getting a job that pays enough to support themselves and whatever family obligations they have, and then also keeping jobs. So we see lots of people getting jobs, many fewer able to retain them. The reason job retention may be a problem could be related to characteristics of the individual, so maybe they don't have the skill set that's required to keep a job, but it also may be characteristics of the jobs themselves. The jobs may be unstable by their nature. So just a few things to keep in mind. So how could we improve employment among a population that we're working with? And these are just the most general ways. So the first category is we can do something which they call the supply side, which is the supply of labor. These are the individuals that we're working with. And we can do things to try to build their skills, to build motivation, but anyway, a variety of activities that involve sort of changing that individual and their ability to get or keep a job. We can also provide services that connect people with jobs in ways that they might not be able to do on their own. We can sometimes do things that actually change employers' hiring decisions, so they change who employers will hire among the variety of different people that they're looking at to fill a particular job. There are strategies to try to make work pay, and what I mean by that is, jobs pay what they pay, but there are in some cases ways to supplement those earnings and when people are working in low-wage jobs. The best example, of course, is the Earned Income Tax Credit, which often does not provide a lot of benefit to people in fatherhood programs unless they're custodial parents. But that's sort of the idea that I have in mind. And then there's creating jobs, subsidized jobs of various kinds when there aren't enough jobs in the private labor market for people who are looking. So what are the kinds of employment services that are used to try to achieve those objectives? These are the basic categories that will be familiar to everyone. I lumped together a bunch of things in the first bullet: job readiness, skills instruction, job search assistance, job placement assistance. Obviously, one of the big points of variation across programs in this is the extent to which the program is actually helping individuals apply for particular jobs. Is the program out there identifying job openings for people that they can apply for, or is it more training people to look for jobs? And that's obviously a key distinction. basic education, which could be GED or pre-GED instruction for people who don't have a high school diploma, various kinds of occupational training, which I'll talk about a little bit later. As I mentioned, subsidized employment. This is actually creating jobs. Some kinds of programs are called transitional jobs. Those are temporary subsidized jobs that help people learn basic work skills. On-the-job training is another model that's been around for a long time. It's a version of subsidized employment where typically a program will pay half or so of an individual's wages when they go to work for a finite period of time. So the employer, it's sort of an incentive for the employer to take a risk on somebody potentially, or spend some extra time on training somebody who may need some extra support. And then earning supplements that I mentioned. These are rarer. The Earned Income Tax Credit is obviously out there, but sometimes programs are able to, if they have funding, provide special earning supplements that are able to at least temporarily supplement low-wage earnings by participants who find jobs. So these are some very, very general findings about all these different types of services that I just talked about. And they're from a variety of different studies. But job search assistance can definitely increase employment rates, or it can at least speed up employment rates. We've seen that in many, many studies. The issues tend to be job quality. So if you're not really doing much to improve somebody's skills, they may only be able to get fairly low-paying or unstable jobs. As I mentioned, job retention tends to be a problem. Another issue, which I refer to there as staff skills, is that we often find that the individual program staff do not necessarily have the skill set to work with employers. So they may be very good at working with participants. They may have great ability to connect with participants and have more difficulty working in the employer community. And so sometimes programs have difficulty finding staff who have the right set of skills to go out into the labor market to identify jobs for participants. Sectoral training programs. So this is occupational training that is focused on a particular employment sector, has very strong involvement from employers in that sector in terms of designing the curriculum and making sure that what people are learning is relevant to the work they would actually be doing. There was a very well-known study by Public-Private Ventures of sectoral training programs that had very good effects in terms of increasing people's employment and their wages. The issues with this kind of program tends to be, first of all, as I said, the employer involvement is critical. This is not just training people out there to do whatever. This is training people in the context of an employment sector where they're literally learning the skills that they need to succeed in that sector. These programs tend to use a lot of screening, both for motivation and for literacy and numeracy. That can sometimes disqualify some of the participants that are in the programs that you're working on, so the programs that you run, rather. So sectoral training is a fantastic opportunity, but it's not necessarily available to everyone. And there often is a need for some kind of bridging type program that can get people up to the level that they need to get to in order to qualify for these sectoral training programs, which are, terrific opportunities. The other big issue, of course, is that people need to pay the bills and feed themselves and their families while they're in training, and sometimes these training programs can last a number of months and require a lot of time, a big time commitment. And so the challenge is always, how do people support themselves while they're participating in training? But even with all those caveats, these can be very effective programs if they exist in your communities, often provided by community colleges or nonprofit organizations. Transitional jobs programs, which I've studied a lot, these are temporary subsidized jobs. We have found that these programs can be very good at putting people to work very quickly. In some cases, when targeting people who are coming out of prison, they can reduce recidivism, not always, but sometimes. The challenge has been, number one, is always cost. Any program that pays people's wages tends to get costly very quickly. But the other challenge is that when we have followed people long enough so that we've gotten past the point where people are in their temporary subsidized jobs, we tend to find that the employment outcomes of people who are in transitional jobs are eventually not really better than people who were in a control group that got just some basic job search help but didn't get a transitional job. So there's a real challenge in trying to translate the experience that people get while they're working in a transitional job into long-term improvements in their employment outcomes. That has been the real big challenge. But these are terrific programs that can put people to work quickly, and that's one of the goals often, is to get people to work and get them some work experience and put some money in their pockets. OJT programs, which I mentioned before, subsidize private employers with usually a half their wages for a particular period of time. There have been a number of studies of these, rather old, like from the 1980s. They were fairly positive results. The trick has always been that these have been small programs, hard to operate OJT on a large scale. They've tended to be selective in who they target. I think all of you know that any program, any service that's sort of making a deal with an employer tends to want to send the strongest participants because they don't want to burn relationships with employers. And so OJT programs tend to be somewhat narrow in who they serve. Earning supplements, these are, as I said, are special programs that provide supplementation to people who are working in low-wage jobs. These have been very consistently effective in programs that we've looked at in terms of both providing people an incentive to work and helping them keep jobs because they've got more slack, more income. The issues are obviously the cost. Subsidizing wages through is often beyond the budget of an individual program. And the evidence we have is mostly for women in welfare to work type environments. We're now doing some research to learn more about earning supplements for a more male population, including many fathers. Basic education programs can definitely increase GED receipt. There's lots of examples of programs that can help people get GEDs. I realize it's not always called the GED in every state anymore. The issue is that the GED, lots of research showing that the GED in and of itself does not seem to have a huge payoff in the labor market. And that's problematic, although a real advantage of the GED is that it is often the gateway to either post-secondary education or training. So in many cases, people cannot access community college programs or other training without a GED. So it is very important in that sense, but the GED by itself does not seem to make a huge difference in terms of people's labor market outcomes. And then the last thing I just want to say is we've done a number of studies of various kinds of post-employment case management or coaching. These are services where staff are assigned to individuals who found jobs and are trying to follow up with them to try to avoid them losing their jobs. We don't see a lot of evidence that has made a big difference. I think the most difficult thing is being able to predict and prevent job loss. It often, mostly probably happens before staff are even aware that there's a problem. The individual's already out of the job. And I think in some cases, we've found that it may be more effective to focus on staying in touch with participants and rapidly re-employing them when they lose jobs, rather than to focus a lot of energy on trying to prevent job loss, because I think it's a very, very difficult thing to do. People lose jobs for a lot of reasons, and some of them are not, necessarily something that programs can do a whole lot about. So some of the key open questions I just want to put out on the table, and these are areas where I don't think we have very good evidence, and they're probably things that you encounter every day. Number one, I talked about the diversity of the population, and we don't know a whole lot about the best way to match participants with appropriate employment services. You have a menu of employment services. You have a group of participants. How do I decide what works best for whom? The one thing I will say that in my experience, upfront assessment is very important, but it can easily become a bit of a black hole where people are assessed and never actually get to program services and may just drop out of programs because they're eager to get a job and they're being assessed. The other thing is assessments. While very important, a lot of programs don't have a good mechanism in place to actually use what they learn from the assessments. So they learn lots of things, but it's not necessarily clear how that is applied in determining the program services that somebody will get. Another question is, many of you, I assume, are providing a variety of services like parenting, life skills, co-parenting, those kinds of services. And the question is, how do you fit employment services in with those other services? And I'm sure we'll hear a lot from Halbert and Carl about some of those kinds of issues. But I think it is a challenge. Many people come to programs for different reasons. Maybe they came because they wanted to get a job, and there are other services that they also would be helpful for them. And the question is, how do you sequence that, and how do you combine all that? Which of the ancillary services and supports that you provide are most important? The reason I put this on the list is that these things can be costly, and so it's very useful to know which are the ones that make the most difference. I don't think we know that answer from research. I'm talking about everything from transportation assistance, child care assistance, referrals for mental health, drug treatment, all those kinds of other services that are not directly about finding a job, but can have a huge effect on somebody's ability to find it and keep a job. And then something that we're looking at a lot is whether employment services can be bolstered, whether the impact of those services can be bolstered by addressing cognitive behavioral issues. And I mean, these are issues that in the way people think that can affect the way they act and can lead to behaviors that make it very difficult to find jobs. Various kinds of cognitive behavioral interventions are used heavily in the justice system to help people reduce behaviors that can get them in trouble with the law. It may be that many of those same kinds of behaviors are the same sorts of behaviors that cause people to lose jobs. And I know many programs use versions of these kinds of services in conjunction with more traditional employment services, and one of the things we're trying to study right now is how those kinds of services can bolster an employment program. I just wanted to leave off with a little bit about some studies that are underway, because there's going to be a tremendous amount of information coming out over the next couple of years, and everything that I just said might be completely changed. There's the PACT project, which HHS is running, which is evaluating a set of responsible fatherhood programs. I think Halbert's program may be part of that. There's the CSPED evaluation, which is through the Office of Child Support Enforcement, which is looking at child support-led employment programs in a number of states, also using random assignment design. I'm involved in these two projects that are evaluating transitional jobs programs for non-custodial parents and people released from prison and other groups. We're going to start having results this coming year in 2016 from that project. New project that MDRC is involved in called B3, or Building Bridges and Bonds, that's going to be testing essentially components of responsible fatherhood programs, so not necessarily entire programs, but trying to get some evidence about some of the issues I mentioned before about specific pieces of programs. There's the Paycheck Plus project that MDRC is running. We are essentially testing an expanded EITC for childless workers. I use the term childless workers, but many of them are not childless in the sense that they're non-custodial parents. They're just not custodial parents. And we are the regular EITC that people are eligible for tops out at, I think, about $500. But in New York City and now in Atlanta, we are testing for a select group of a few thousand people. We are testing an EITC for childless workers that goes up to as much as $2,000 a year, so much larger than what they're currently eligible for. And we're looking at how that affects things like employment outcomes, material hardship, child support payments, criminal justice outcomes, and a whole variety of things. A very exciting project. And then there are a number of projects going on. The PACE project is an HHS project. Work Advance is something MDRC is doing, that are testing various kinds of career pathways programs. These are different kinds of training programs for a variety of different populations, and hopefully we'll be able to learn more about the whole occupational training area from those projects. So I'm gonna leave it at that, and hopefully we can come back to some of this in the discussion. There's my contact information if anybody wants to get in touch. Send it back to you, Nigel.
Okay, Dan, thanks very much. Yeah, and that really does set the table very well. Yeah, I think as Dan said, there's a lot of key questions here that we're going to be addressing in the rest of the webinar. I think particularly how to involve employers, the right kind of staff skills. I did want to mention, again, in the downloadable resources section, you can download resources list, and that has further information on a lot of the work that Dan's doing at NDRC. Also, a lot of the ongoing research projects that he mentioned. You can find more. You can find links to more information on that in the resources. They're all under the Administration for Children and Families Office of Planning, Research and Evaluation, OPRE. So we've got resources there from OPRE, from the Clearinghouse, also from the Office of Family Assistance, from MDRC, from the Office of Child Support Enforcement, the Fatherhood Research and Practice Network, and a lot of others. And one thing that, again, we encourage you, to think of this as a learning community. As you look at that resources list, if you see resources that you're familiar with and you're thinking, why aren't they on this list? Send them to us, and we'll stick them on there if it's applicable. So one other thing I wanted to say as I introduce Halbert, Halbert and Carl are both current Office of Family Assistance grantees and have been for quite a while now. And I'm guessing there's quite a few folk on the call who are new Office of Family Assistance grantees. So I did just want to preface some of what you're going to hear from Halbert and Carl in terms of what they do at their organization and have been building this over a number of years. They do leverage a range of resources to provide these services. So you can't necessarily do everything that they're doing through your new Office of Family Assistance grants. And if you want to do anything that you're not sure about, as always, you have to talk to your federal project specialists. So I just wanted to put that caveat up front there. And then let's bring Halbert to the table to share some wisdom about what works in St. Louis. Halbert, time is yours.
Good morning, or should I say good afternoon. First, I would like to thank the National Fatherhood Clearinghouse for this opportunity, and a special thanks to Nigel, whom I've known for many years. In the bio, you've gotten enough information about me. I won't repeat any of that. We are a fatherhood organization. We were created as an agency to address the issues centered around fatherlessness and to improve outcomes for children using the father as a vehicle to do so. So essentially, we build all of our methods and strategies around how we can improve the lives of children, families, and communities, as is indicated in this mission. We were created in 1997, and if you look at these goals, we're still working with the same goals. We feel that they're still applicable for the work that we're doing today. I want to bring special emphasis to the third bullet, which talks about both parents. We have created, as part of our programs, we currently have a youth program. We also have what we call a parenting in partnership program. That's a program that works with the mothers of the children. We created that program because, as I say, our main focus is to improve outcomes for children. And to do so, we decided to work with the moms to enhance the likelihood of us creating doable and inclusive co-parenting agreements that might lead to a little bit more visitation for our dads. Our youth program, we created that so that we can sort of be a preventive, to get in front of this thing that we keep calling deadbeat dads, to help youth to understand what is responsible behavior, goal setting, and things of that nature for their life. We've been around for a while. We have experimented with a lot of different approaches, but from the very beginning, we started out using this so-called cohort approach, which we've been using the same approach for 17 years. And when I say we looked at a few different approaches. We provide our services day and evening, and we have another project that we call our Father's Rep. And that was one of those projects, that is a project where guys just come in a couple times a week for a couple of hours. While for those guys who choose to come, they seem to enjoy it, but we could not deliver a lot of content through that type of setup. Our cohort approach allows us, I think we got about 210 hours per week over a 6-week period of time to deal with our dads, their situations, and employment. While we are focusing in on parenting, and that's because we want to enhance the interaction between a dad and his child, responsible parenting is a great thing. However, we feel very strongly that part of being a responsible dad is that you have a job. So during this 6-week intervention, we weave in our employment readiness information as well as our employment readiness activities. And for us, we use a repetitive learning process. The employment readiness activities are very important. A dad that spends time with his child, fathers love their children, and they want to be able to be providers. The population that we serve shouldn't be any surprise to anybody. We work with both dads, either the custodial dad or the non-custodial dad. However, we're looking at we're working with a low-income population of fathers. Naturally, if your income level is higher than, say, $40,000, we would not be able to allow you into our program. That was unless you got about 8 kids or something like that. Then that would put you below the federal poverty guidelines. We work with dads of all ages through our youth program. We've had dads that were as young as 13 years old. And as you know, a vast amount of our dads have child support issues. Many of those issues are centered around needing a modification or trying to get some help with their driver's license to keep those or prevent them from being taken away. One of our newest programs, we've been working with reentering citizens for at least the last 13 years. However, we receive funding to bring more structure to that. We work with a little over 300 reentering citizens per year. During that process, naturally, for the fathers, they have to participate in our responsible fatherhood programs. But they receive job training, substance abuse prevention, as well as employment placement and case management. We have a partnership with our Department of Corrections, which allows us to go into the prison system and begin working with our dads at least 6 months prior to them being released. You heard Nigel talk about how we've been around for a long time, and many of the things that we have in place, some may not be able to put in place. But I would suggest that those who are working with this population, and any population, that they get some type of therapeutic approach to working with their client population. What you see on the screen is our therapeutic approach, and it all involves helping our fathers to change their mindsets. We work with, as I stated, the low-income population coming from a very urban setting, as well as having backgrounds of criminal behavior. My method or strategy is to help the dads to begin to work on themselves in changing how they view themselves, changing how they view them situations, and just grasp hold to what is occurring in so-called normal society around them. We move forward once we get into, this is the method or technique that my social service team will employ, the facilitators will employ, as well as my career advisors will employ in their interaction with our fathers. A few of the services that we start off with, at the Father Support Center, we have a whole host of services. Our guys, again, 8 hours a day with us, 5 days a week for 6 weeks. Services are provided as though you were in high school. First period from 9 to 10, you got English. Second period, you got science, and so forth and so on. But we have a variety of services, all built around responsible behavior, but also we have services intended to meet some of the emergency or crisis needs. Many of our guys will come in. Some of them will be homeless. Some of them will be on drugs. And we have different services that we can provide that will address homelessness. Very limited temporary housing situations. We can also support some emergency assistance and pay for housing for a short period of time. Our fathers will start off with putting together their career pathways plan. That plan would also include a single care coordinated plan, which is pretty much a goal setting sheet or IEP, depending upon the language that you're used to using. Fathers are participating in our employment stability. They get mentoring. The mentoring and the job coaching is pretty similar. The earlier statement was asked, we work very closely with our employers, for one thing. So mentoring and job coaching is very similar. It allows us an opportunity to maintain a relationship with the employer and thus maintain a relationship with the guys that we place into employment. When we look at job readiness, we dig a little bit deeper into our job readiness piece. Our job readiness piece is not just about how to fill out an application or how to put together a resume. We do assessments, and we will begin it with literacy where it's needed. The other key piece for our job readiness piece, if guys have their adult basic education or their GED, high school diploma, we do another assessment to test what vocational skills that they may be interested in. And during the process, we will help the guys to complete a FAFSA, which is a Pell Grant application, but we also have some funding that can pay for some vocational skills training. It is my contention that, as my previous speaker mentioned, that guys need employment, and they need to be, those that come to us are, I would say about 85–90% of them are unemployed. So they need some income ASAP. And we would encourage them getting that income. As a matter of fact, we'll help them to get it. But we also want them to participate in the vocational skills training so that they can, at some point, be able to afford to pay child support and live on their own and pay for their own livelihood, their own living. Next slide is just a simple overview. We created our own employment readiness training curriculum. And this curriculum is not rocket science by any means. Anybody could utilize some of the content that's in this curriculum. As a matter of fact, we borrowed the curriculum content and topics from initiatives that were taken from the original Workforce Investment Act. They concentrate on personal development. Again, that's an opportunity to get them to change their attitude and behavior as it relates to employment. Most of our guys feel as though a minimum wage job is below them. Well, we'll work with them to get the attitude to change. The minimum wage job is better than no job, is better than no money. The different topics that are covered, the next slide will go into a little bit more in depth the type of material that we think has been very successful in helping our guys to begin to view themselves and their future differently. As stated before, most of the interaction that we do with our men throughout the 6 weeks that they're with us is to get them to change the way they view themselves and their situation. We want them to get the mindset that they're not a victim. They're not being victimized. When a person can stop viewing themselves that way, they're more likely to get motivated and move in a better direction. One of the main sections that we really drill in is that section 2. We really want our guys to understand work ethic. The men will come to us, again, 5 days a week for 6 weeks. And they be supposed to begin class at 8 a.m. in the morning. However, if you ask one of our fathers, what does 8 a.m. mean? It means you're late. Because we really want them to get here early. Most of the population that we work with will have problems on their jobs because they're always late and are always absent. So we really, really drill that in so that they understand the value that they bring to the company by being on time. The next slide, section 3, deals mostly with how to conduct yourself. A significant amount of people think that these guys or people should know how to conduct themselves on a job, but yet their history shows that they don't know how to conduct themselves on a job. So we don't take it for granted that they should know how to. And as you can see from these topics, they're very basic. The important piece is that we cover it. The other important piece is that we have the guys to actually interact. We do a lot of modeling. We do a lot of role playing. We do a lot of role reversal where a guy might be facilitating a topic, and we allow them to really, really get into it so they can feel it and know what it seems like. One of the things we talk about when we say feeling it, one of the things we'll do is a mock interview, and we'll record those mock interviews so that they in turn can come back and they can critique themselves on what occurred during that interview. The next, section 5, most of section 5 is centered around communications. With our population that we work with, oftentimes communication for them is about them talking. Well, we have to get our fathers and our population to understand that listening is the most important piece of communication. So we work very hard. There's a couple of 2 or 3 topics to help them drill down. And again, there is the role playing and the interaction. Other ones that we will address deals with the health. We put in our health component here basically so that our fathers can begin to think about their health and in turn think about their child's health. We want them thinking about the child's health because we have many of our fathers who've gotten employment and they may have had the child that they're currently living with on his or her insurance. However, they don't have their outside children on their insurance. We want them to understand also about nutrition, how to be healthy. We're trusting or hoping that this will impact the entire family. In mentoring and coaching, highly important. The coaching piece allows us to maintain contact with the client while they'll come to us 5 days a week for 6 weeks. Our project actually has interaction with our dads for an entire year, and we're gathering data during that year. A little overview, again, of the variety of services that are provided to our dads. You see a couple of them where they said, where we talk about referrals, and there with the with the substance abuse and the mental health. We actually have some resources where we can pay for those substance abuse. When those dollars, as they run out, we have relationships in the community that will accept our referrals. The most problematic piece that we have encountered, again, is the housing piece. We do work with a regional housing group. However, housing for dads is very limited. The transitional housing is still very limited. But because we've been around for 17 years, we do get a lot of cooperation with providing some housing for our dads. And again, we have some money that we call emergency family assistance dollars where we can help to house a guy for a small period of time until we can get him employed. Part of his involvement with us, although it may be in the employment program, again, everything we center around family assistance. Family reunification. A dad who is involved and has family thoughts, he is more likely to maintain employment than a guy that is out here hanging on the corner. We have a great MOU with our local, with our state child support enforcement agency where we can bring many different interventions that would ease some of the pain of our guys dealing with child support enforcement. Recently, the MOU included the guy can pay as little as $20 a month for a period of time. And then after he's got employed, after about 3 months, then they'll start bringing that up. We can't intervene with any criminal prosecution that he might incur if he can get to us before he gets to the court. We also provide transportation assistance, very important. We hear all the time that this person should just get a job. Well, if you sit back and examine how much it costs for this low-income to no-income person to go and get a job, here in St. Louis, one-way trip on the Metrolink costs you about $2.50. And it's very difficult for these people because oftentimes they have no money. So that transportation system is highly important in your job placement activities. We're taking a look at our staff, our employment team. The first person you see here is the employment career advisor. This career advisor essentially is a case manager. This person helps to keep the fathers on track with the career pathway and the single care coordinated plan. The career advisor also is responsible to move a father from one job to another job. Here at Father Support Center, employment is very important. As a guy completing our project, he may find himself in a temporary employment, temporary job, or a minimum wage paying job. Well, the career advisor, their main job is to keep tabs on this father, keep tabs on that employment, and help that father be able to move from that temp job into a permanent job. We also employ what we call accounts managers. Our accounts managers are actually responsible for the development of employment opportunities. But as you will see with the next slide that I put up, each one of our accounts managers, they manage anywhere from 50 to 60 employers, and their job is to develop opportunity for our guys. Our accounts managers, when they are developing that opportunity with the employers, they do not sell our product as a social service agency. Employers are interested in their bottom line. And so how the accounts managers sell the service is what can we do for your agency. We have a different type of a brochure that these accounts managers are armed with. And this brochure speaks to the training that the guys will have occurred while they're in our program. We'll talk about the attitudinal training that they'll get, the effective communications training that they get. But they'll also talk about a number of different certificates. This brochure will talk about a number of different certificates that is available to our guys as they go through our employment readiness piece. Certificates such as the customer service certificate training, first aid and CPR training, lead abatement training, Microsoft certification training, A+ certification training, CAN/CNA training, SafeServe training, forklift, and OSHA training. These type of things are placed on that brochure so that the employer knows that this guy has or can impact his bottom line, because this guy will come with certain trainings that the employer may not have to put in place for this man to be successful or this person to be successful at the workplace. The other piece, again, that we look at when we look at our employment piece is the GED, and I should say literacy and pre-GED. Many of our guys either have problem reading and problem with comprehending what they read. We actually have a GED high-set instructor on staff. But at the same time, we will work with other adult basic education providers, and we're working through the St. Louis Public Schools, and we're working through the St. Louis Agency on Training and Employment, which we call SLATE. That's our local WIP/American Job Center. and they assist us, too, with our GED referrals/placements. Because after we get guys jobs, depending upon when the job is hiring them for, we will need different outlets. Now, once we get a guy involved with either one of the St. Louis Public Schools, ABEs, or SLATE, the social service case manager and the employment career advisor, they maintain contact with this father many different ways, either through visiting the job, hence job coaching, visiting the GED site, and or letters and phone contact. I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but data. I do know I had it on one of my earlier slides. Our data is to help us to learn more about naturally our successes, right? But we have our own system. It's called Apricot. Apricot is pretty similar to efforts to outcome, just a little bit more friendlier to use. But we are able to build different things into that system to learn a little bit more about the effectiveness of our programs, but we also do pre- and post-tests, client satisfaction surveys, so we can learn from a client perspective what's successful, but we can also learn more about clients' attitudes.
Excuse me, Hal, but I just wanted to pop in now and make sure we have enough time for Carl. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think you did talk about your last slide a little bit, right? So did you think we could pass it on to Carl now and then come back and hear about the final slide at this time at the end?
Well, as you pointed out, I have touched on that, so we can move forward.
Okay. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the presentation. Yeah, you've got so much information to share, Howard. That's great. We do just need to do another quick poll question. If you could pull that up, Enzo, and then we'll go to Carl. So as you see, this is just asking you, what is the main challenge you face in delivering employment services for fathers? And you can respond, there's a lack of jobs in our area. There's a need for more job training in specific employment fields. Finding jobs for participants with criminal records, and access and support services to help participants overcome barriers, as well as job retention is the fifth option. I'll just give you another second on that, and then we'll go to Carl to hear about what they've been doing in West Virginia. So, Carl, the time is yours.
All right. Thank you very much. First, I want to thank the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse, my distinguished co-presenters, who I'm big fans of, especially Howard. He's definitely a pioneer in the field of fatherhood, and also our support that we receive from the Office of Family Assistance, and Damon, who's a good friend of mine as well. So without delay, I am the COO of Children of the Canal Institute for Social Research and Action, and hopefully I can give you some information and help you avoid some of the heartache and heartbreak that we've had over the years since we've been working with fathers. Congratulations to any new grantees that are on the line. We've been doing this work as a nonprofit since 1993, where we started, and we just basically started helping kids who could not read the Bible at the time. We are the faith-based 501c3 of Ferguson Memorial Baptist Church here in West Virginia. And unlike most programs that serve in a county or one site, we serve in about 20 counties throughout the state of West Virginia. So we've mainly focused on 4 areas of our framework. Our services fall within this framework of HEAL. We're trying to heal communities, so we have health initiatives, we have an employment initiatives, asset development initiatives, and then learning opportunities. So what that basically means is because of the work that we've done, in particular around strengthening families and working with fathers, we were approached by a health agency, by our local DHS or DHHR where you're located, because of the amount of men that we were serving, they asked us to set up a clinic so that we could provide physical exams for them and their children, and also we can do fee-for-service. So that may be an opportunity that you want to look into with your own agency to see if you can, outside of your grant, look for ways to sustain your efforts for your agency. The other opportunity that you may want to look at for your agency is to become a socially necessary service provider. Again, that's a fee-for-service. Maybe some of the training that you are doing, you don't have staff that are on 100% of the time, or you could hire some other folks throughout your agency to be designated as a service provider for your DHHR or DHS, working with the clientele that you currently have. From the top, Dan had mentioned some information about public-private ventures around transitional jobs and working with them, and I'll get into that a little bit. They actually coined the term, there's a difference between a deadbeat dad and a dead broke dad. And I think a lot of the folks that we will encounter are actually dead broke dads. Everyone knows the deadbeat dad doesn't really want to do anything, wants to sit around on his blessed assurance, but the dead broke dad is a guy that wants to be involved with their children, however, needs some kind of opportunity or some kind of break or some kind of skills training in order to realize that. So we'll continue on with the PowerPoint presentation. Again, we started in 2003. I was the first fatherhood specialist on with KISRA, and we've been doing it till present day. Through our new grant, we have, it's called Reform, and this is our third time being funded. We typically serve nonviolent, non-sexual offenders. We assist them to reintegrate into the community. Of course, we have employment training and placement programs, but as I mentioned by the first presenter as well, we focus on cognitive behavioral skills. Just to stop a little bit there, there's a term that we like to use, whether you're working with folks who are incarcerated, previously incarcerated, returning citizens, or folks that just have a checkered past as far as work history. We have to do something in order to get the way that they think to change. We like to say the stinkier they're thinking, the more services they need. So we, on the reentry side, we have an assessment tool which is called the LSCMI. If you look it up, it's just LS/ should be /CMI, and that stands for Levels of Service Case Management Inventory. And that basically focuses in on how high of a criminogenic need a person has. So that will focus in on mainly 6 domains. It goes everything from antisocial and pro-social contacts to education level, the amount of offenses that they have on their background, and so forth and so on. So that may be something that you want to look into as an assessment if you're working with ex-offenders. If you're working with a person who doesn't have any criminal background, we then have that LSCMI drives our case management for the fathers that we work with. But if you have a person that doesn't have any criminal background, we have more of a goal-based approach that drives their case management. So that's just some food for thought for you. We also help with challenges, as the other programs do, around substance abuse, mental illness, or co-occurring disorders, housing, and employment. If you're talking employment, you can't talk employment unless you talk about the other issues that surround employment or impacting employment, such as housing, income, food, health care coverage, their level of education, their literacy, their mobility, disabilities, mental health, their substance abuse history, legal, safety, credit, life skills. I mean, the list goes on. All these things that impact employment. So we found out a long time ago that we couldn't only say, hey, come over here, we'll get you a job, because I can get any guy a job today, but they'll lose it tomorrow because of how they think or their baggage that they're carrying. So when guys come to us, they're a lot of times they're in an emergency mode. They're in high toxic stress mode, very traumatic awareness or sense. And we have to get them to slow down and say, listen, It's because of the decisions that you made to this point prior to coming to our program that you still have to deal with. There's no magic wand that we can wave right now in order to speed up that process, but you do have to deal with the consequences of some of your decisions that you've made in the past. Now, we don't want to hold you to your past. We want to help you with a game plan to go farther and further, but you do have to pay your dues, so to speak. So to Halbert's point earlier about folks not wanting to have a minimum wage job or that being beneath them, you have to start somewhere, and that is our message to them as well. So here from our CEO, Dr. Foster, there's a quote by her about helping with resources to allow ex-offenders to build careers, not just a job, pushing ex-offenders and fathers to get low-wage or dead-end jobs increases their likelihood to go back to the ways that got them in that situation in the first place. So we also focus on skill building, hands-on training, job development. We have case managers, job coaches, and instructors. But if you're in a more rural area, we have specialists, where specialists kind of is a jack of all trades, and they do a little of everything. The other thing that I would suggest for your programs as it relates to assisting folks with employment is have as much of your staff cross-trained as possible. Okay. There's a quote up there on the side. I don't know if you guys can see that as well. We also do support services, mentoring, transportation, housing, child care assistance, and those that are listed there as well. We are also a second chance grantee as well. We've been that for the second time. We are AFI grantee. These are all resources that you can look up that'll help with employing the men that you work with. So if you ever get a chance to look up AFI, that's Assets for Independence. Typically they have IDA programs. IDA is an individual development account. With that account, you can, in our program, how it works is in 6 months a person could save $500, and we would match their $500 8-to-1. Actually 6-to-1. No, it was 8-to-1, and it would be $4,000 combined with their $500 in order to go toward a down payment on a home and had to develop some kind of asset, a down payment on a home, to start a business, or to go to school. So if you look up Assets for Independence, that may be a supplementary resource that you can add to some of the services that you currently have. Okay. The main thing that I don't really want to get into the weeds of all of our program of what we do. I think we all will do the same things. We're going to be doing something on economic stability or helping folks get employed. We're going to do something on relationship skills or helping marriage or whatever it is, and we're going to be doing something on workforce development, and then some things on parenting or relationship education. So all of those things will be the same. I will challenge you to identify a cognitive behavioral therapy curriculum. The one that we currently use is called The Courage to Change, and it has a bunch of different topics that you could review. Again, any of my suggestions or the presenter suggestions, check with your federal program specialist to see if it's something that you could change in your program, if they're in favor of that, or if you have to stay in current accordance with the guidelines that you agreed to on your federal contract. So what we did we started our Growing Jobs project. This previously came on our last grant. We had a awesome federal project specialist that we kept saying, hey, these guys, they love our programs. They've gone through all the courses. We've been vetting them. We get high marks on our inventory, our surveys, satisfaction surveys from them. And they keep saying the same thing. Chad Band, nobody will hire me. So what we had to do was we said, look, we have to try and ensure a way for these guys to get hired. So what we did, we started creating jobs. So the thing that we started off doing with our Growing Jobs project, it was 3-phase. You can see a small picture. This is across from our empowerment center where most of our programs occur. We set up 3 greenhouses and a packaging facility in the back where we grow food. So a lot of times you're working with these guys, they'll tell you they've never had a job, they've always worked on a table. So we took advantage of some folks and their transferable skills. We taught them how to grow something legal instead of something illegal. Definitely got to bolster those transferable skills, and then also a way to start a social enterprise that typically focuses on the 3 P's: people, the profit, and the planet. So you're not strictly worried about the bottom line of the business, but you're trying to create jobs for fathers, also get more locally grown produce into your local area, and also reduce the carbon footprint that's out there where in West Virginia we may be getting produce from Mexico or from California. We also had, so we had a farm there. We also had, we have a food truck where folks would do culinary skills, and then we had a culinary skills kitchen where folks would learn serve-safe certification, knife skills, culinary math, and fabrication. So the goal was to be training folks on the farm, teaching them there to see if they like that. If they wanted to go into catering, they could go into our culinary skills program. And then if they just wanted to be their own boss, which a lot of them want to, they could see if it was for them by using our food truck, and they could go out on their own and try that as well. So this is what our farm previously looked like. We had a bunch of flowers in one, and we had some produce in the other one. We originally just started with 2, but if you go down this path, and we can talk about this on a whole nother webinar about social enterprise or doing social enterprises to help the folks that you work with or your agency, we actually converted our houses from using soil to hydroponic. So you can see some of the jobs that we did actually create and that the 32 participants did complete going through that. Annually, we were serving 2,000 fathers per year, just to give you a feel for what we were doing. Our current numbers for this round is around 800, so we'll be serving about 800 fathers, just to give you a little context. So once we, of course, you have to get the right people on the bus if you're going to do a social enterprise and you're trying to create jobs for the fathers that you work with or the men that you work with. So we had to hire in some consultants to help us on how to grow. We also took full advantage of our 1890 land grant institution. West Virginia State University has been a great partner of ours. They actually gave us this hoop house, this third hoop house here. So we're doing hydroponic, aquaponic, and aeroponic growing. It's basically all soil-less growing in order to help create more jobs in our community. Also, so I won't bore you with all the great things that we grow. I've mentioned some of this previously, and I'm trying to get us on time so we can hear from you as well. But we do go to farmers markets. We are an aggregator. We did seize the opportunity to create something that other farmers who didn't have the capital or the resources that we had to actually come to our facilities, and they can box or package their produce or also participate in value-added products. So the simple concept of growing hydroponically is you can see how many head of lettuce you have here, about 16 per row, 16 to 20 per row. And then I can get 150 in a house. So you're looking at about 118,000 head of lettuce in 2 greenhouses, and you usually can charge anywhere from $150 to $2 a head for lettuce. On the vertical farm that we set up on the west side of Charleston, which is a unique concept because a lot of times people don't have land where their program is operating, you can use an old building. So we're growing in a warehouse, and we'll actually produce. When you saw the picture here about this one right here, you're basically using, like if you were in Sam's Club, the pallet rack. So you have 6 levels of growing. You're producing on each level You're using lights to grow as well. And in the facility that we have, we'll produce about 7 tons of leafy greens per year. So those kind of things are what we're using to try and sustain not only our program but our agency. Again, have a conversation with your federal project officer to see if that is something that is that you guys could explore. If not, go to your local bank. They have CRA dollars, which is Community Reinvestment Act dollars, where they can help you design or pay for a feasibility study. You want to hit these banks. Hit is not the word whenever you're doing a development, but since everybody on the line is family, you want to hit the banks up in January because that's when they have the majority, the lion's share of their CRA dollars available. So I would make my way to any bank that's serving in your community. They have to reinvest dollars back into the communities where they're placed and where they serve. You also may want to partner with your Department of Agriculture. Also, some of the great partners that Halbert mentioned, child support, the Department of Corrections, your regional jails if you have a regional jail, and also your local hospitals. There are many opportunities for you to step in if you really believe in the work that you're doing, you're training these guys, and you think you have quality individuals. You can broker deals with large businesses and small businesses to take over shifts for Walmart. I know the Ridge Project did that out of Ohio. They've been very successful with that. I know in Chicago, the Safer Foundation has started a staffing company where they employ their guys as well. So there are many opportunities. If you really believe in guys, you should hire them also. A lot of you are in the process of hiring staff. I remember going to a training for the national conference for our Second Chance Act grantee, and these are the folks that advocate the most for folks that have a checkered past or criminal background. And they asked a show of hands for all of the grantees that had a person on staff with criminal background, and no one raised their hand. So we immediately came back to West Virginia to try and practice what we preach. So I would encourage you to hire the target population that you're trying to serve with the grant dollars that you have. So right now, Nigel, I'm interested to open up the floor or pass it off to you. There are other things that I could talk about, but for the interest of time, I wanted to make sure we had enough time to get to the folks that were on the line.
Okay, Carl. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, and as Carl indicates, we could continue this conversation for a long while. It feels like we really just sort of scratched the surface. I would like to underline what Carl just said about looking to hire participants, because in my experience of visiting programs, I think some of the most effective staff are guys who've come through initially as a participant and then really eager to give back to others. So we are getting pretty tight on time, and we've got quite a few questions. As I said, questions that we don't get to today, we will ask the presenters to provide us some responses in writing, and then we'll post those. But I did just want to quickly circle back to Dan with at least one question. So Dan, there was a question while you were talking about the high school diploma. You had mentioned that the GED doesn't seem to have much of a direct payoff in the labor market. Is that the same for the high school diploma?
No, I mean, I think the research that's been done has actually compared people who get a GED to people who get a regular diploma, and has found that from the employer's perspective, the GED is sort of considered somehow lesser than a traditional high school diploma. It may be because they have a perception that people who've gotten a high school diploma, had a certain level of sort of stick-to-itiveness that allowed them to make it through all the credits that they needed. So I think it is. People do, the research has mostly, I think, found that the GED and the high school diploma are not equivalent.
Okay. And there were a couple of other research-specific questions. This one may be too complicated. If it is, we can respond later. But there was a question asking if you'd seen a difference in the results in terms of employment retention based on the primary focus of the program. For instance, if there was a program focused on child support arrears instead of parenting or relationship stuff, do you think that makes a difference in employment outcomes
I don't think we have, I don't think there have been enough studies to really be able to say that. The one area where I think employment retention has definitely been affected is these programs that have managed to supplement people's earnings when they're working in low-wage jobs. Those definitely had effects on employment retention. But in terms of that particular question that you asked, I don't think we have, evidence on that.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. And we also had quite a few questions on recruitment. I'm wondering, Howard, if you could just sort of very briefly talk about what has perhaps been the key for you in recruiting guys and gaining their trust to come into the program.
Well, the key thing for us is that we do hire guys that have completed our program. And during our recruitment process, we use many different ways. One of the main things is the street outreach, where not only do our guys who complete the program go into the streets, passing out flyers and talking to people, but they also pair it with a professional so that we can answer some questions if asked on the street. Most of our guys come from word of mouth. We've been around about 18, 19 years, and so we've done some good work. We also have a great relationship with family court, as well as child support enforcement, where we will get referrals in from those entities. But the key thing is those past graduates, guys who completed the program, volunteering to hit the streets to enhance our recruitment efforts. Anything else?
Nope, that's perfect. Yeah, I'll shoot some more questions at you afterwards to respond to, so we can get that. And Carl, if you could just again very briefly. Could you just say something about how you've worked with other employment and training providers in the community?
Sure, I had to take my phone off mute. We work with a bunch of different employment trainers in the area. We see that there's a lot of folks out there that need help, and it's not just going to be our agency that does that. So we really leverage the power of partnership. In order to work with them. We use them, and we host job fairs annually, actually semi-annually. We also have a annual conference where we have a job fair built into our conference as well. So we also, for that, it would be good to have a town hall meeting with employers. And one thing that we found is we had to go from being an advocate to practicing what we preach. So employers are expecting you and your agency to go out and say, hey, hire these guys, they're great. Let me tell you about this federal fidelity bonding program that will bond these individuals, and they also get a tax credit. But they also want to see that you have some skin in the game. So when you can say, hey, we hire our own participants, as Howard has stated, it carries a lot of weight because a lot of these folks don't want to be known as the ex-offender employer or the place that hires those guys. So you have to practice what you preach. You also want to have town halls where employers are able to get together and talk to themselves to say who they're hiring and how their experience has been with the jobs from your program as well.
Okay, well, much appreciated. Yeah, and as you see in your in the chat box there, you'll see that Jackie Rhodes from our staff is sharing some information about our Responsible Fatherhood Toolkit that's got a lot of other key stuff for you there. On your screen, you see contact info for each of the presenters and also for the clearinghouse. And I forgot to mention this up front, but we have had a few problems lately with the info@fatherhood.gov email address. So if you did want to send us any comments, questions, ideas, which again, this is a learning community and we welcome all your input, and we'll try and respond to everything. You might copy Enzo there, one of our colleagues, and just to make sure that we see your message in a timely fashion. So with that, we are at time here. I do want to pull up the evaluation questions. Enzo, if you could just pull those up for everybody to respond to real quickly. And if you'd bear with me and stay on the line, I'll give each of the presenters the opportunity to say just one final thought, one take-home message in just really no more than 1 or 2 sentences, but I would like to give them that opportunity. So if you have time to stay and listen to that, please do. If not, we certainly appreciate your time and look forward to talking to you next time, and we'll be responding to any emails. So I see that people have responded to that first question. If we can go to the second question. second question is just asking whether you strongly agree, etc., with the presenters effectively communicate their expertise. And one more second on that, and then let's have the final question. So while we're doing this, presenters, if you could just think about that one, really one sentence, final word of wisdom you want to leave people with. And I'll go back through you in the order that we had the presentations. So in fact, Dan, if you'd like to start now while folk are just finishing up on the poll. So if you could just leave us with one final thought, one key thing you'd like people to take away from this.
I don't know if I have any pearls of wisdom. I would just say stay tuned because there's a lot of new evidence coming out over the next year or two, and we should be learning a lot more. So hopefully, Nigel, you'll be able to help communicate to folks what's being learned.
Absolutely, yes. And, for anybody who's not on our listserv, make sure you do send us your email address, and we'll put you on there, and we'll keep you updated on all the stuff that Dan was talking about earlier. Halbert, final word of wisdom.
When working with your populations, make sure who your populations are. When we work with the low-income population, we learn that the more frequently the interaction from the agency, the better your outcomes are going to be for that person. So my word of wisdom is to create a project that has a lot of frequency, a lot of touches from the agency to enhance a good outcome for your client.
Absolutely. One of the questions that we didn't get to respond to fully was how do you build trust with dads? And I think that answers that pretty well as well, for sure, yeah. So, Carl, you get the final word.
Sure. Be a family. This is a community. We're all in this together. We go as the field goes. Any of the presenters will tell you, please feel free to call them. Also, be a researcher, and a practitioner. Take advantage of the website links that were offered to you. There's some great research coming out that is now bridge research. It's not just for folks who are PhDs, but it's also for individuals who are practitioners as well. So find out what the latest trends are and stay ahead of the curve.
Great. I really like that. Yeah, I like the whole idea of family because we are. I certainly feel that. As Halbert said, he and I have known each other for a long while. I met Dan back in the 90s, and I've known Carl a pretty long while as well now. So what we try and do through the Clearinghouse is be a vehicle to share these kind of resources and update you. And, I think talking of family, that means in this context, it certainly means employers, as we've heard. You've got to have employers on board with you. It means all the other folk in the community who can help with the supportive services to overcome barriers. It means the researchers that we can learn from, et cetera, et cetera. So with that, I bid you farewell for now, and we'll be in touch. And please stay tuned to our website, and we hope to talk to you in the near future. Have a good day,
Thank
everybody.
you much. Thank you much. Good to hear from you, Carl.
Yeah, I thank you to all the presenters. Thank you.
And that does conclude today's conference. Thank you for your participation.